In 2006, a former Ukrainian military radio technician, who identified himself only as Andrei S., came forward with what he claimed was a surviving portion of audio logs recorded beneath Chernobyl in the immediate weeks following the disaster. According to his account, specialized teams were sent into a subreactor level, a supposedly sealed environment, not to assess damage but to restore auditory containment. The tapes, which he claimed to have smuggled out hidden in a modified radiation dosimeter, were only a few minutes long, degraded and partially distorted by static. But through the hiss and crackle, several distinct layers could be heard: the rhythmic humming of some machine, an oscillating frequency that shifted every 17 seconds, and in the background, unmistakably, the sound of breathing. Not human breathing. Something deeper. Hollow, as if through lungs too large for a man. Followed by a low vibration that made some listeners feel nauseated or momentarily forget where they were. A linguistics expert in Vienna, who analyzed the samples later, said the audio contained harmonic patterns too ordered to be random. She speculated the recordings may have captured what she termed a syntactic signal, a kind of nonverbal language composed of pure frequency shifts. According to her, this language was not designed for human ears. "We were not the intended receivers," she said. "We were eavesdropping." But eavesdropping on what? The deeper the investigation goes, the more impossible the pieces become. A series of Soviet blueprints, unearthed from the archives of the Moscow Institute of Advanced Energetics, show designs for what appear to be containment vectors, structures meant to shape spatial fields. These are not reactors. They are stabilizers, designed to suppress dimensional rifts, measured in units never defined in mainstream physics. On one diagram, a structure labeled CHRNBYL is connected by underground channels to 3 other sites: one near Oymyakon in Siberia, one beneath Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan, and one, astonishingly, off the coast of Antarctica, marked simply as ARC 3. These nodes form a perfect tetrahedron when mapped across the globe. What were they containing? The mythos deepens when we examine Project Morpheus, a rumored Soviet experiment aimed at weaponizing consciousness, particularly dream states, in proximity to anomalous gravitational zones. According to unofficial sources, Chernobyl was the largest of these experimental fields. It was not just a reactor. It was a conductor. Civilians in Pripyat, especially children, reported dreams of massive underground cities, staircases of black stone, and voices that whispered from within their walls. Psychologists chalked it up to radiation-induced hallucinations, but the reports were too consistent and began before the explosion. One boy, age 8, drew a detailed map of what he called the below town. The layout included 3 central spires, endless corridors, and a chamber labeled the Eye. That drawing was confiscated. The boy died 3 weeks later. Cause of death: sudden organ failure. The city of Pripyat was not merely evacuated. It was abandoned in a pattern suggestive of deeper strategy. Military records show entire squads entered Reactor 4's substructure and were never accounted for. Those who returned came back altered. Their cognitive functions diminished, their emotional responses flattened, as if something had been extracted or overwritten. A nurse working at a Kiev hospital in 1986 reported that some of these soldiers refused to be touched, muttered sequences of numbers continuously, and often stared at light bulbs as if listening to them. Several died within days of arrival, but none from radiation. Autopsies revealed brain tissue damage with no sign of heat or exposure. One had a small glass-like shard embedded in his spinal column, unlike any known material. The shard was removed. It emitted a constant 4.2 Hz tone when placed in water. And still, the anomalies continue. In 2015, a team of Polish geophysicists attempted deep Earth sonar mapping beneath the reactor zone using advanced seismic reflection tools. Their equipment malfunctioned upon nearing a depth of 800 meters. The data that was recovered revealed concentric rings beneath the structure. Not natural, not geological, but architectural. One of the scientists quit the project and joined a monastery in Bieszczady. He refused to speak to the press, but in a handwritten letter sent to his colleague he wrote, "We're not above it. We're inside it." But what was it? There is increasing evidence to suggest that the Chernobyl site was not just the location of a catastrophe. It was a kind of vault, a prison, and something inside may not have been entirely inert. Enter the phenomenon known as the whisper zone. First reported in 1990 by stalkers, illegal explorers of the zone, The whisper zone refers to a specific radius near the reactor where individuals report hearing voices when alone. These voices do not follow conventional patterns. Some repeat numbers. Others recount personal memories the listener has never shared. One stalker claimed a voice told him the exact date and method of his father's death, a fact he later confirmed and had never known. Acoustic analysis of recordings made in the whisper zone shows audio signals that echo without physical surfaces. That is, the echoes return at intervals that suggest empty space, as if the reactor sat atop a hollow much larger than any official foundation. Attempts to lower microphones into the deepest remaining shafts beneath Reactor 4 resulted in the complete failure of all analog and digital equipment. A single analog tape survived, capturing what experts called a continuous harmonic pulse, oscillating at the threshold of perception. That same pulse has been detected near other ancient sites, notably the Pyramid of Djoser in Egypt and the megalithic complex at Gunung Padang in Indonesia, suggesting, perhaps, a deeper global resonance. A network. The idea becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss, that the structure beneath Chernobyl is not of Soviet origin, and perhaps not of human origin at all. If true, then the 1986 explosion wasn't just an accident. It was a response, a ceiling, or an attempt at one. In the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, fragments of truth began leaking through cracks in the newly opened archives. Among the most disturbing was a brief, heavily redacted report from the Committee of State Security, KGB, dated late 1984, 2 years before the explosion at Reactor 4. The document, coded UX Omega, referenced an incident deep below the reactor construction site involving uncontrolled visual phenomena and brief phase displacement. According to the report, several workers vanished mid-task. Surveillance footage was described as inconclusive due to field distortion, but one frame was attached, a blurred image of a tunnel filled with light bending at impossible angles, and a faint, barely visible silhouette not matching any known human proportions. No further explanation was offered. The summary ended with a cryptic recommendation: initiate sleeping protocol, notify Aero Group, lock outer ring, and restrict access to level Theta indefinitely. The Aero Group is referenced in only a handful of surviving Soviet documents, always in connection with anomalous environments, altered time perception, and something called the mirror complex. Speculation among contemporary researchers suggests that this was a secret scientific military faction, separate even from the KGB, tasked with handling objects or locations exhibiting nonlinear properties, what we might now label as interdimensional or extradimensional events. And then there's level Theta. No map of the Chernobyl facility, public or classified, lists a level Theta. It does not conform to traditional naming schemes, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Instead, it matches language used in theoretical physics, Greek symbols denoting wave functions, decay states, or unstable zones of probability. According to whistleblowers from within the Ukrainian Ministry of Energy, the physical foundation of the reactor descends farther than publicly admitted. Blueprints recovered from Soviet microfilm archives suggest a spiraling descent beneath Reactor 4, more than 1,000 meters down, to a chamber simply marked Central Node. What is the Central Node? A leaked schematic shows the node as a void surrounded by 9 equidistant pillars, each embedded with what appear to be obelisks, not of stone or steel, but of an unidentified black alloy. Some resemble basalt, others glisten like volcanic glass. The schema contains notes written in Russian and Latin, an unusual combination. One margin reads, Corpus fractum mens integra. The body is broken, the mind remains whole. Who, or what was this referring to? By 1982, scientists at the facility had begun to refer, unofficially, to the central node as the lattice. Not a structure, but a system. Not physical architecture, but a containment field operating on quantum interference principles. It was theorized that the lattice's purpose was not to trap a thing, but to isolate a space, a wedge of reality disconnected from the standard flow of time. Some now believe Chernobyl was an accidental rupture of that isolation. Not an explosion, but a breach. And it didn't go unnoticed. Starting in 1987, satellite weather data over northern Ukraine showed inexplicable temperature fluctuations over a consistent pattern centered on the reactor. These anomalies didn't match weather systems. They resisted wind patterns. More strangely, aircraft flying over the zone during these events often experienced brief temporal discrepancies, clocks losing or gaining several seconds with no mechanical failure. In 1991, a French parapsychologist named Etienne Leclerc conducted an unsanctioned expedition into the outskirts of the zone with a modified EEG helmet and a rudimentary dream recording system. He reported lucid visions of vast caverns beneath Chernobyl, populated by cyclopean machinery, rusted but pulsing, and lightless beings whose presence could be felt rather than seen. He emerged from the zone delirious, muttering in a mixture of Latin and Old Church Slavonic. He died 1 month later from cerebral hemorrhage. His last words were, "It dreams still, and it dreams us." The entity he referred to remains unidentified, but some survivors of the early cleanup effort, the so-called liquidators, independently reported dreams containing recurring motifs. A mouth without form, stairs descending forever, mirrors that did not reflect. Several later developed schizophrenia, though their conditions resisted medication and exhibited synchronized symptoms across vast distances. In 2002, a joint Ukrainian-Belarusian geological expedition attempted to map subterranean magnetic anomalies in the zone. Their instruments malfunctioned near the reactor ruins, but in the brief window of functionality, they recorded a magnetic pulse signature that matched no known natural process. Instead, the pulse resembled a patterned binary structure, suggesting either a signal or a broadcast. This has led some to speculate, was the accident a call? A signal, not of failure, but of release? Consider the testimony of Yaroslav Markin, a former logistics officer with access to restricted reactor data. Before his death, he claimed the entire Chernobyl facility was originally designed with geometrical constraints not for efficiency, but for resonance. He showed diagrams comparing the facility layout with cymatic patterns, wave interference forms that emerge from sound vibrations. His point, the architecture was not random. It was a kind of tuning fork, a bridge. But a bridge to what? In 2018, thermal drones recorded a previously unknown cavity beneath the concrete sarcophagus of Reactor 4. The cavity appeared warm, active, despite being sealed for over 3 decades. Ground-penetrating radar suggested a central shaft within the void, descending at a perfect angle of 66.6 degrees, a number dismissed by mainstream experts, but seized upon by occult researchers. Inside the shaft, the radar briefly registered motion, not structural shifting, movement, and then the feed went black. A later investigation reported equipment failure due to interference. Yet no magnetic field strong enough to cause such failure could be found. Even more disturbing, the shaft had not existed in earlier scans, as if it had formed or been opened after the scanning began. Back in Kiev, a retired psychic investigator named Alina Dobrovic spoke of what she called the song beneath the stone. She claimed that while visiting the Pripyat outskirts, she could hear the reactor, not through her ears, but within her skull. A rhythmic hum, like a slow heart. She said the zone was alive, not metaphorically, literally, and the reactor was its mouth. When asked what it wanted, she replied simply, to be remembered. In the winter of 2019, a group of rogue historians and geophysical analysts known as the Black Archive Initiative released a 134-page dossier titled Subsurface Continuum, Evidence of Pre-Anthropogenic Infrastructure Beneath Pripyat. Though rapidly removed from the public web, mirrored fragments persist. Within them, seismic overlays, fragmentary glyphs discovered on reactor-adjacent walls, and most shockingly a proposition that the structure buried beneath Chernobyl predates Homo sapiens. The theory put forth was staggering. According to the Black Archive, the deepest layers beneath the power plant revealed interference patterns in the Earth's crust consistent with artificial manipulation, not by machines as we know them, but by field compression. These were not carvings or tunnels, but soft matter memory scars, patterns impressed upon geological matter by a form of resonance engineering. In other words, reality was folded, or impressed by intelligent intent. Not built in the classical sense. Imprinted. This would explain why the architecture under Reactor 4 cannot be fully mapped. Why chambers shift location. Why staircases descend endlessly in one session and abruptly terminate in the next. The material does not obey three-dimensional constants. It adapts to observation. Some researchers now claim that the subterranean anomaly is a form of active memory lattice, capable of imprinting and reinterpreting physical space based on the expectations or consciousness of those who enter it. In effect, the structure beneath Chernobyl is not dead. It is dreaming. But whose dream? And what happens if it awakens? Further insights come from the so-called Anemo report, dated 1978, recovered from a half-burned warehouse outside Minsk. It details a breach of continuity during the excavation of reactor sublevels, a brief moment in which time stalled for 0.7 seconds, as recorded by synchronized atomic clocks. Workers froze in place. A power drill hovered mid-fall. Instruments stopped, but not analogously. They ceased registering time. One worker reportedly bled from the eyes and whispered a phrase in a language that linguists have not been able to identify. The report simply called it non-native resonance event. The implications were buried. Soviet authorities began sealing off deeper shafts, not due to radiation concerns, but because reality had become unstable within. Reports of mirror displacement, spatial overlap, and impossible reflection angles were noted in internal logs. One particularly harrowing entry described a technician who saw his own back entering a hallway he had not yet stepped into. He died by suicide 3 days later. In 2020, a former CERN researcher, Dr. Helene Varga, reanalyzed the limited data retrieved from Chernobyl's deepest sensors. Her conclusion: the zone emits a temporal drag, a field that warps localized time perception by nanosecond increments, scaling upward with depth. Her theory postulates that Reactor 4 did not explode in linear time. Rather, it burst across timelines, causing cascading anomalies not just in physical space, but in temporal probability fields. This might explain the so-called memory collapse phenomenon. Dozens of Pripyat evacuees, even those far from the blast, report retroactive memory shifts. Entire days they do not remember living. Events experienced that leave no material trace. Family photographs featuring unknown individuals. Dreams of returning to apartments that never existed, but felt more real than the ones that did. A neuroscientist from Lviv who examined the brains of long-term zone workers claimed their neural patterns exhibited strange looping formations, repetitive structures normally seen only in patients with persistent déjà vu or epileptic auras. He believed the anomaly beneath Chernobyl may not be confined to matter or time, but to thought itself, an idea as virus, a thought structure that infects memory. In 2021, a classified memo from the now-defunct Soviet Department of Transcognitive Energetics was leaked anonymously to the European Parascience Consortium. It referenced a theoretical framework known as chronoform engineering, the manipulation of memory-based time loops using reactive loci. One such locus was codenamed Obelisk V7, directly connected in internal documents to the Chernobyl site. The implication was clear. Chernobyl had been identified, long before the meltdown, as a location where time was susceptible to influence not via machines, but through directed consciousness, a kind of quantum archaeology. Memory, dream, trauma, these were the tools, not circuit boards or turbines. A small red stamp on the corner of that same memo bore a disturbing phrase: Воспоминание — это оружие. Memory is a weapon. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet elite had splintered into two factions. The rationalists, who saw the anomaly beneath Reactor for as a dangerous instability to be suppressed, and the esoterics, who believed it to be a gift, a message buried deep in the earth, waiting for a mind sharp enough to hear it. One of the key figures in the esoteric faction was Dr. Valentin Obakov, a physicist who vanished in 1986 under mysterious circumstances. His journals, discovered in 2009 in a locked archive in Kharkiv, contain hundreds of sketches of geometric structures, spiral wells, impossible lattices, and repeating eyes in the shape of the Cyrillic letter, a character long obsolete. One entry reads, "We think the earth is solid, but it is just surface tension over an idea. Below there is memory. Below that will." Obakov believed the node under Reactor 4 was part of a global network, ancient, intelligent, and still functional. Each site had a unique frequency and neural tone, and could be accessed through synchronized cognition, in simpler terms, shared dreams. And indeed, since the disaster, dozens of unrelated individuals from across the globe have reported similar dreamscapes, black spirals descending into lightless wells, walls pulsing like lungs, voices repeating number sequences, and cities where everyone walks backward toward the horizon. In 2013, a Canadian sleep study captured the brainwaves of a subject during such a dream and converted the data into audio. When slowed down and filtered, the sound resembled a low chanting in monotonic intervals, linguistically similar to Enochian, a magical language reported by occultist John Dee in the 16th century. The question, Is this language emerging from the dreamers, or is it being sent to them? Chernobyl may be more than a location. It may be a signal amplifier, a psychic loudspeaker embedded within our planet. In early 2024, a daring expedition of underground cartographers, operating under the alias Project Breachpoint, entered a forgotten shaft beneath Reactor by descending through the remains of the cooling system. Equipped with lead-line fiber optics, biometric monitors, and custom interference-resistant comms, they mapped a corridor that should not exist, a smooth descent of over 700 meters that terminated in a hexagonal chamber. The chamber walls were etched with moving script, not holograms, not light, but stone that flowed under observation, like carvings remembering themselves. The glyphs responded to biometric readings, pulsing faster when emotional states intensified. One glyph, described as an inverted halo, emitted a tone that caused one team member to bleed from both nostrils. She later reported remembering events from before her birth, images of a city shaped like a Mobius strip, where the ground reflected the sky, and thought changed the architecture. The most disturbing part of their report was this. The glyphs stopped responding after 12 minutes, as if something had noticed them. After exfiltration, one of the team members disappeared from his apartment in Kiev. No signs of forced entry, no trace of him on CCTV, but on his kitchen table a note. "I'm not the version you remember. He's still inside." The handwriting was his. This aligns with the theory of echo entities, theoretical constructs formed when a consciousness brushes too closely against reactive memory structures, like a fingerprint made in reverse. Could the anomaly beneath Reactor create copies? Or worse, overwrite the originals? Across the border in Belarus, researchers monitoring geomagnetic fields reported synchronized pulses between Chernobyl and an obscure archaeological site near the Pripyat marshes, a set of mounds previously thought to be burial hills. But ground-penetrating radar revealed concentric rings, magnetic null zones, and, in one mound, what appears to be a stone with the same inverted glyph recorded by Breachpoint. This may suggest the node is not alone. Chernobyl, then, is one aperture of a deeper structure, a distributed intelligence embedded into the planet itself. Ancient, dormant, but not dead. A CIA report declassified under pressure in 2006, but redacted into near uselessness, briefly mentioned something called the cathedral effect, a resonance-based phenomenon where specific architectural spaces, especially those mimicking religious forms, activate altered states in those who dwell inside them. This might explain why the Soviet reactor's superstructure, uncharacteristically elaborate for an industrial facility, contains elements lifted from Eastern Orthodox cathedral layouts. Were they building a containment vessel, or a temple? Even stranger, inside one of the sarcophagus maintenance ducts, a rusted metal plaque was discovered in 2022. Barely legible, it reads, "The house beneath the house. Blessed is the locked door." No record exists of its installation, and the sarcophagus itself, the so-called concrete tomb, continues to show anomalies. Cracks form in mathematically precise angles. Chilling drafts emerge from vent shafts that should be sealed. On rare nights, a faint hum is audible, not mechanical, but choral, like a song with no source. Field recorders near the base of the new safe confinement shell have picked up whispering patterns. One phrase recurs. The key is in the forgetting. Some now believe the original catastrophe was not just a failure. It was a ritual, a detonation designed to feed the structure below, to burn memory, emotion, and suffering into the node. Energy not measured in kilowatts, but in collective psychic trauma. A sacrifice. And if so, we must ask, who or what was the offering meant for? And did it wake?
By 2025, the zone had changed. Not just in physical geography, the growth of mutated forests, the strange resilience of fauna, but in something deeper, more subtle. Those who walked near the reactor no longer reported just nausea or unease. They spoke of presence, of being watched not by drones or guards, but by something ancient, patient. The Ukrainian government, under pressure from multiple foreign entities, quietly authorized a covert operation known as Operation Mirrorwell, a final expedition into the deepest layer beneath Reactor 4. It was to be the last. The team, 6 members. No names were released. Each had undergone months of neurological conditioning, psychic resistance training, and cognitive grounding. Their mission? To reach the central node, record it, sample it, and, if possible, interface. They descended into the reinforced shaft beneath the sarcophagus at 3:17 a.m. on April 26, 2025, the exact anniversary. Communication was lost after 87 minutes. What remains is a single recovered file, an audiovisual fragment transmitted milliseconds before blackout. The footage is corrupted, but analysts reconstructed brief images. A chamber wider than any map indicated. Walls moving in slow ripples. A structure at the center. Not a machine, not a being, but something in between. It breathed. Its surface reflected not the team, but versions of themselves, some older, some dead, some wrong. Then the sound. Not speech. Not music. But a rising tone that made waveform analysts cry without knowing why. A frequency like homesickness for a place you've never been. A voice not heard, but remembered. Then silence. The entire expedition was declared missing. But then, the dreams began. Across Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and parts of Western Russia, thousands reported identical dreams in the weeks that followed. Descending staircases beneath iron skies, walking into a room with 9 pillars, and meeting a figure made of mirrors. Some heard phrases they didn't understand, but remembered anyway. You are not first. We built you, from what was left. Memory is the barrier and the bridge. One woman in Bucharest, a linguist, awoke fluent in a dead dialect of pre-Slavic origin. A child in Kharkiv painted a city with architecture that matched the hypothetical geometry of the node, impossible spirals, stairs into voids, windows that looked back. Then came the silence. All radiation monitors, near reactor, 4 flatlined. Not dropped. Zeroed.
No dica.
No particles. As if the core had stopped being radioactive, or had left this plane entirely. Engineers called it impossible, but the data held. No more whisper zone. No more anomalies. As if the door had closed. But to where? A final fragment arrived through a secure channel believed to originate from the now-defunct operation Mirrorwell uplink. Just a text burst. 1 line. It is done. We did not contain it. It contained us. Some now believe the anomaly beneath Chernobyl was not a structure, not a prison, but a lens. A focusing point in space-time. A place where consciousness becomes visible, where memory and geometry intersect, and the observer is absorbed into what it observes. The meltdown then was the spark, the sacrifice, the offering, the ignition. Not a disaster, but of a process. A cycle. We were never protecting the world from Chernobyl. We were shielding Chernobyl from the world. Because it was never ours. And perhaps now, it remembers where it came from. But the most unsettling question remains. What if the city beneath the city was only its mind? And now that mind has awakened, where's the rest of it? No new flowers grow near the reactor anymore.
No birds. No insects.
Just stillness. As if the earth itself is holding its breath. Waiting. Listening.